Hello, and welcome to my course on startups in the medical sciences, a dynamic field bridging innovative research and practical industry applications. We'll explore how startups are transforming healthcare and biotechnology and the role they play in bringing groundbreaking ideas from the lab to the market. This course will also delve into case studies of successful startups, analyze the ecosystems that supports their growth, including venture capital trends, incubators, also known as accelerators, and academic partnerships. All of these providing a comprehensive overview of the journey from concept to commercialization. To give you an example of what we'll be talking about, I'll start with the story of insulin, which is close to the heart of all U of T, students and faculty, and that's because Banting and Best discovered insulin in 1922, and they also won the Nobel Prize in 1923. And it's a great example of a very impactful discovery for the treatment of diabetes. And, inevitably, right after their discovery, there was a need for mass production of insulin for treating diabetes around the world. Now, I'm not going to talk about what they did right after that, but what I will talk to you about is this little startup called Genentech, founded in 1976, and they pioneered the development of recombinant DNA technology, which led to synthetic insulin. And inevitably, this breakthrough in biotechnology revolutionized the treatment of diabetes as well as laid the foundation for the biopharmaceutical industry. So there's a great example of an innovative idea that was brought to market and benefited medicine greatly. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this course. So, what is a startup? A startup is more than just a new company. It's a venture that aims to address a unique market need or problem that is both scalable and innovative. Now, in the context of medical sciences, startups often focus on developing new medical technologies, drugs, or treatment methods. They operate under high risk, but offer the potential for significant rewards, both financially and in terms of societal impact. So that's the risk reward trade off. Now, startups in medical sciences are not just businesses, and as I said, they're ventures that challenge the status quo in healthcare, and they aim to solve complex medical problems as well as simple ones, but generally the more complex ones, and using cutting edge technologies, for instance, like artificial intelligence these days, biotechnology for many years now, has been providing innovative solutions to the medical sciences. And then finally, digital health solutions. And that one is interesting. I'm sure you heard of it in the late 2000, like kind of 17, 18. It kind of came out and it was a big thing and it was going to take over the world and revolutionize everything, using your phone. And then it kind of stalled. And, we'll talk about it later on the course, but basically it stalled because the acceptance of using your phone to deliver medicine was questioned. Like people were just like, well, should we be doing that? And so it was a perspective thing, right? But what came along? Well, COVID-19. And so COVID-19, what it did, it forced everybody to start working remotely, to doing things remotely, doing things through your phone, through. And so, perspective changed, right? So now, interventions or, delivery of healthcare that can provide, basically, delivery remotely, as well as minimizing contact, is now something that's okay, right? Because we were forced into it. And so that's one of the reasons that digital health is coming to the forefront. The other one, of course, is the appearance of AI, right? So artificial intelligence and machine learning, as you know, it's been around for a long time, but it's only recently that it's been brought to the forefront as a possible solution or technical advance that can be used in medicine. To tack a little bit more on the COVID-19 story, here's an example of how things can benefit from your environment and circumstances. Well, inevitably, with COVID-19 being this terrible pandemic, there was a need for vaccines, and so that drove the industry to develop vaccines as quickly as possible to address this epidemic, right? Well, no surprise. They were successful, as you know, and the two big winners in this was Pfizer and Moderna. But Pfizer, well-established, big pharmaceutical company, good for them. But Moderna was a startup, and they were a startup for a while, so 2010. So it's not like they started right away in 2019, but in 2010 they were a startup. They were doing their best, working in RNA technology, and inevitably they jumped on as well. And both Pfizer and Moderna won basically the mRNA race to bring a vaccine quickly to market, right? And that mRNA technology has been just fantastic, because not only is it an innovative approach, but it has disrupted the traditional vaccine production pipeline, if you wish, and it's going to help tackling other diseases, right? So not just COVID-19, of course. But there's an example of another example of a startup. So Moderna was a startup. They raised, from 2010 when they were, founded, to 2017, and they ran, privately in those years. But they raised money and funding over those years as a startup to try and make it, right. But it was their contribution to COVID-19 that just made them, and then they went public, and now they're a very successful big company. But there's another example, and of course tied to COVID-19, which was the driver, right? So next up, let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of a startup. So what are some of the key characteristics of startups? Well, startups are generally characterized by their scalable business models and potential for rapid growth. So inevitably, rapid growth is needed for success, and if you don't have a business model that's scalable to match that growth, you're not going to make it. And so, this all of this is driven by the customer needs, and so the goal is to have more and more customers, and so obviously the more customers you get, the more you need to scale and grow rapidly. But of course, all of this operates in a state of uncertainty, and this demands a flexible and adaptable organizational structure, because there's kind of a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in your experience of a startup. Like, it'd be wonderful to think that, like on the graph here, it just shows that you have this kind of nice exponential growth. No, that's not usually the way it works. Is you make some gains, and then you recede back, and you make some more gains and you recede back, and it's not always one step forward, two steps back, no, but that definitely does happen. And so you need, an organization that can adapt to that, right? So meaning that, you grow rapidly, and then, you kind of pull back, and then you grow rapidly, and you pull back. And this agility is crucial for the medical sciences sector, where scientific and market landscapes are constantly changing, evolving, right? Startups in this sector, are known to have to be collaborative in approach, frequently partnering with, big brothers, or big sisters, like larger companies, research institutions, healthcare providers, and not only do they have to partner a lot and look for friends, but they also have to consider what's called pivoting, right? Which means to maybe change their directions a little bit or a lot really quickly. And this is in response to research findings, for instance, or market demands or regulatory changes. So, if your market, all of a sudden changes and says, oh, we need this, well, then you need to really quick make a change to meet that market demand. That will make you successful. If research findings change, so you were hoping it was going to be this, but it's that, well, you got to maybe pivot, regulatory change is a big one. You think, oh, yeah, for sure, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be class 2, and then boom, you don't get it. You don't get the regulatory approval. Whoa, what do I do, right? So for the time being, well, maybe we'll be a wellness product, and then we're going to wait, and then when we can make the claims for class 2, then So there's the need to be able to be adaptable, and to possibly pivot. Examples of companies in this space. Gilead Sciences, they were antiviral drugs. There's a good example. They pivoted in order to develop treatments for HIV and hepatitis C. From their initial focus on antiviral drugs. So they basically, when HIV and hepatitis, it was more HIV at the time, and but hepatitis was big as well. When they saw the need, right, the market need for it, they pivoted, right? So instead of focusing strictly on antiviral drugs, they kind of went, I wonder if we can develop drugs for treatments in HIV and hepatitis C, and they did, and boom, they've been successful, ever since. So there's just an example of a pivot, but there are many, 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 and many more, and we'll talk about them. So startups in the medical sciences and life sciences, they tend to focus on biotechnology and biopharmaceuticals. And they're at the forefront generally of drug discovery, digital health, any kind of advanced medical research. And they must navigate complex regulatory environments like Health Canada in Canada, the FDA in the United States, and they all of their processes need to be approved. And this very often requires significant capital and time investment. And so as a startup, you're going to have to remember the term cash burn rate, which is a crucial concept in understanding, the financial challenges that these startups face. So you always have to remember money in, money out, right? So if you're getting invested dollars in, fantastic, but you got to think of the money out, right? You have to pay your employees, you have to make expenses for what your research or your development of a product, and that's the out, right? And so that's your cash burn rate, So how much money you burning every month is an important concept in startups. Now, these startups often work on groundbreaking projects, for instance, like in gene therapy, personalized medicine, novel drug delivery systems, and they face unique challenges such as very long development cycles or very stringent clinical trials. So, success comes from those startups that are able to navigate all those challenges and still be successful without running out of money while they're doing it. And so, the stories like we've already talked about, like we've already mentioned, like Moderna, for instance, BioNTech. These are great examples of, Pfizer. Let's not be unfair. So Pfizer as a big company, but they were successful as well for the rapid development of COVID-19, vaccines. Highlights these challenges and successes in this sector. So Pfizer is a good example of where there are big established companies, so they were able to do it. Good for them, yay! And they were first. They were the first approval FDA was to Pfizer, right? And then Moderna was right after. And so, wow for Moderna, right? So for a small company, startup company that was, doing this, where Pfizer was a big, established, well experienced company, good for Moderna. And there's an example of a successful, startup, right? So what's this BioNTech company? So here's the interesting one. So BioNTech was a startup as well, but they collaborated with Pfizer to develop their mRNA vaccine. So there's what I said in the previous slide already, is that collaboration is key. It's very important. Partnership is very important. And so this is where Pfizer, big company with lots of experience and know how to do stuff, they're like, I wonder how we can get this to work as quickly as possible and to be successful. And this little startup, BioNTech, said, "Oh, well, we're really a small startup, but we have some ideas and we know how to do stuff, but we just can't. We can't foot the bill. Like we can't do this on our own. We just, So there was the, a match made in heaven of a startup with a big established company, and the two of them together, cha-ching, they made success. They achieved success by bringing to market a you know wow successful product in the shortest amount of time. So there's an example. What I'm saying, like the experience, the money, the resources, the capability of Pfizer was what was needed in order to support this young new startup BioNTech in order to make it happen. And then in contrast, you have Moderna, which was you got to think Moderna wasn't like a one person shop. They were running since 2010, but they were still considered a startup. They hadn't been fully established and they weren't public. And they were able to match it as well. So there's that perfect contrast of the big driver, COVID-19, and then how do we address it and who can do what? And so depending on where you're at and what you have, you need to decide, can I do it on my own? Do I need to partner? And that was the perfect example of all of that. So how about academic collaboration? So of course, very important because academic research is basically foundational research. So it's the research that is needed in order to describe, elucidate a concept, a phenomena, and then that research is then used or mined for more applied research. So research that can then be used to manufacture a product, to provide a solution or an innovation that can be marketed and put into practice in a given industry, or in our case, in medicine, so applied to medicine. And so, U of T is a prime example of an academic institution that fosters, thriving startups and the startup culture. It supports the startup culture. And this is where innovative ideas and research are not only encouraged, but also supported, in terms of resources, but also for the transition into a viable business venture. And this is, contributes significantly to our medical sciences ecosystem or our medical system. Now, are there some examples of how U of T does this? Yes. So Creative Destruction Lab, there's a great example. Health Innovation Hub, there's another one. That these two, I guess they can be considered accelerators, incubators. They are programs that provide mentorship, funding, resources, and help translate this academic research into commercial successes. An example of a company, Deep Genomics. It's a Toronto-based life sciences or medical sciences startup, and originated from the University of Toronto. And the company focuses on AI-driven drug discovery, and has made some significant raises in terms of funding to accelerate the development of what's precision medicine treatments, or what I guess used to be called personalized medicine treatments. And there's an example, and there are many more, but there's just an example of how this works and what would be possible if you at the University of Toronto are considering a startup. So let's better describe the role of academia. Academia plays a pivotal role in the early startup landscape, especially in the medical sciences. And it's because it's a source of foundational research. We've already talked about that, but it's also a source of talent for the startups, right? And this collaboration between academic institutions like the University of Toronto and startups is vital for this translation of theoretical knowledge into practical market-ready solutions. So something that's a product that's marketable, right? And academic institutions are crucial for this early stage research that underpins all these medical science innovations, but they don't just provide intellectual groundwork. They're also used for first testing or validation of these ideas or of these early products, or what's called most viable product, MVP. uh, and so it's a great testing ground, right? And so therefore the collaborations between academia and industry are vital for this translation. Now, when I talk about productization, I don't want you to think that's a negative, right? So, value is what you think is important, what you think is something worth trading for, or bartering for. That's how money came to be. And so it's just see it as a form of value. So meaning that if you make a product, or if you have an innovation, if you just make a discovery in your lab, well, that's wonderful. That's very exciting for you. And you're like, oh, wow, look what I did. But where's the value in that, right? So you're going to say, oh, well, the value is it's going to save, millions of people. Maybe, but it's not there yet, because your idea or your discovery needs to be packaged in such a way that it can save millions of people. And so that's what I'm talking about. When I say you're going to commercialize something, you're going to have a startup that's going to take that groundbreaking research and convert it into a product that can be commercialized. That's what I'm saying is you can't save millions of people unless you can deliver it to millions of people and it's going to save them, right? And so that's the tricky bit, and that's what startups are all about. And I think that's often what is missed, when one is talking about startups and business and all that. Is you always think right away, oh, businesses are naughty and pharmaceutical companies are naughty, but I'm not talking about well-established multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies. I'm talking about startups. So I'm talking about that early process of taking early discovery and converting it to something that's of value. That's what I'm talking about. An example of a discovery having value is CRISPR, right? So here's a groundbreaking gene editing technology which originated from the research at the University of California, Berkeley, and MIT, and Harvard. And this innovation has led to the creation of many medical science startups that focus on gene therapy and genetic medicine. So there's an example of how a discovery is a discovery. Great, fantastic, wow, cool, published. But how do I use it? Well, there's a bunch of startups that have decided that's their interest, is taking this discovery and turning it into a commercializable product that can then be used in the population and have societal impact. That's ultimately the goal. And of course, in order to compensate the company who brought this to the market, they're going to get paid. So yes, there will be obviously money involved, and there will be profit involved. That's the whole point. That's the driver. But you have to look beyond that, is that once the product is available, that it is going to have a societal impact. And you're going to say, well, what if it doesn't have a societal impact? Well, then, yeah, it's useless. In my opinion, it's useless. But in terms of the government, it would also be useless, right? So the government is not going to support, or pay for that product unless it will have, or it has, societal impact, and it is cost effective in its delivery. That's how the government estimates or judges whether or not a product, they're going to support a product. If it is really a product of convenience, so meaning that it is not needed, it's wanted, so it's like, cool, wow, that's cool, I want that, I want to use that, then the government's not going to pay for it, right? Because it's not cost effective for the delivery of health in the country, and it doesn't have societal impact. But if it's really cool, and a lot of people, millions of people, want to buy that because it's cool, it could become a product, right? And it could be very successful because people are going to be buying it because it's cool. I just want to put that on my face because it makes my face look so young and whatever, but it doesn't do anything to make you healthier or make you better, but it just looks really cool, or makes your face look so bright and nice and beautiful that you're going to buy that cream and you're going to put it on your face every day, right? So there's an example of where you have to make your mind up, like what kind of a business are you going to be. And what I'm going to teach in this course is about medical science, of course. And so it's going to be for the delivery of medicine, and the ultimate goal of the delivery of medicine is to treat and care for your patient. So that's what I'm going to focus on. But it doesn't mean that there aren't other, not jobs, sorry, companies that are out there that are just for profit, and their products, right? So that's just something we will also talk about in this course. So how about government support? Well, government support is crucial for driving innovation, especially in the academic sector. Through funding programs such as the MyTax program, incubators, and mentorship opportunities, governments help foster an environment where the medical science startup can thrive. Now, this support is not just about economic growth. So, inevitably, startups represent an important, sector in the business or companies that operate in this country. So that would be about the economic growth, right? Supporting startups means you're supporting new businesses that are going to contribute to the economy. But it's also about elevating the country's social status and creating new opportunities for its citizens, which makes sense, right? Now, government initiatives often focus on providing the necessary infrastructure, regulatory guidance, right, and regulatory oversight, and the financial incentives to nurture the growth of startups, particularly in sectors like biotechnology and digital health, which come under medical sciences, where the potential for societal impact is significant. So this is where we're going to focus on in this course is that aspect that yes, it is business, yes, it is commercial. However, it is the goal really is societal impact, because you're caring for citizens of our country, and so it's that delicate balance. Yes, you're part of a for-profit enterprise. You are selling a product, but ultimately that product is to contribute back to society by helping, caring for its citizens. So that's where the government needs to position itself by looking at health economics, by looking at, is it a cost-effective solution to purchase or pay for this product? Because if it is, then what it's doing is it's dealing with what's called scarcity of dollars. So meaning that we only have so much money to treat and care for everyone in our country. And so by making purchases of innovative and excellent technologically advanced products, we are going to do more with less money because of it. And so that's health economics. And then it's justified, right? So it's justified for public pay, for the government to pay for these products, even though it's for profit. So meaning that the companies who develop them will profit from its sale. But it's okay because ultimately it's doing what the government needs to do, which is to care for its citizens. So what's a spin-off or spinning out of lab? So turning lab research, so specifically research that has been done in an academic setting, into a successful business is something that happens all the time, and it involves several key steps. It starts with evaluating the commercial potential of the research, securing intellectual property rights, which is key to safeguarding your commercial product, and developing a solid business plan, which is always the tricky part. After that, you have to assemble the right team and then seek adequate funding in order to support your journey. Now, spin-offs often emerge from university research where a discovery or a technology developed in the lab shows potential for commercial application. Universities love this, and they support it, and they nurture it, and they want you to do this. And these ventures require a careful balance between the scientific rigor and the business strategy. We're often navigating the challenges of translating complex scientific concepts into marketable products and services exist. So that's the tricky balance, right, of converting these complex, not always, but very often complex, innovative solutions into something that's marketable and sellable, right? Whether a product or a service. I'll give you a funny example of, or an interesting example of a spinoff. So the company is Illumina, and they are a leading genomics company, and they're a spun off from research conducted at the University of California, San Diego. And what they do is they have innovative DNA sequencing technology that's basically, contributed to the transformation of genomics research and diagnostics. Well, in my master's at U of T, many years ago, I actually did sequencing of a portion of a section of the genome of a cyanobacteria, so a photosynthetic microorganism. And it took me months. Like, it took me months I had to actually run the gels myself and do all the pipetting and all that fun stuff. But now, now you send it off to be sequenced. You can basically get it back the same day. Like, it's crazy. How things have changed. But anyway, there you go. So there's an example of a spin-off that's very successful and has contributed so much to the world of genomics. So we've talked a lot so far about product. So it makes sense because that's probably the easiest format any kind of research can take if you're going to try and sell it. A product, right? Something that's tangible that you can exchange money for, right? And so no surprise, that's probably the most common format for startups, is to have a product that it's working on. So when you have research and you have research findings, you have foundational research, and you think, this research could contribute to a really cool, innovative product that I think we can sell. The question always comes to mind is, okay, sounds good. What's that going to look like? And how involved is that product? And how much work do we have to put into it to get it ready for marketing and for sale? And so the concept of the minimal viable product, or MVP, is central to the startup development, especially in tech-driven fields like digital health. An MVP allows startups to test their product with real users, which then gives them the opportunity to gather valuable feedback and iteratively improve their offering or their product, right? So this approach helps in validating the product's market fit before the full-scale development or the scaling of the company, or dropping like large amounts of money to get this out into the market. So in medical sciences, developing an MVP can be challenging due to the complexity of the products and the need for rigorous testing or the possibility of regulatory approval. However, the MVP approach can still be applied in stages, such as developing a prototype for initial user feedback and then conducting early stage clinical trials to assess, its efficacy and safety. So always remember, the MVP doesn't have to be sexy, it doesn't have to be polished, it doesn't have to be perfect. The goal of the MVP is to get feedback, to get opinions, to get some initial testing, validation, iterations. So meaning that you may actually want to test different iterations of your MVP and just see which one fits best, or which one looks like it will match the market, or be successful in the market you're interested in. So that's your MVP, and it's crucial in deciding what is your MVP at the right time and by the right people. Because if you choose an MVP that's too advanced, for instance, which can happen and happens actually quite a bit, then you're spending more money on that on the development of that MVP, and then you find out, you know what, that's not going to work for us. Well, you've just spent all that time and money on that MVP. It's better to spend less time on it and less polished MVP, but then you get the answer quicker. So the expression for that is to fail fast. So meaning that if you're going to fail, you want to fail quickly as possible, so that you don't spend the time and the money on it, too much time and money on it. And then you can move on to the next iteration, right? So that's the expression, to fail fast. Now, interestingly, once you have your MVP and you're going to be sharing that around and showing people and testing it, and the thought that comes to mind is, oh, that's interesting. You're going to be showing it to people and giving it to people. They can, handle it and check it out and use it. What's stopping people from actually looking at it and going, I can do that. That's a great idea. And then running off and doing it. Well, of course, the answer to that, and it's not an easy one, is IP, or intellectual property. The intellectual property is a critical factor of success. And the reason for that is you may have wonderful success in your startup, but if you don't protect it, that success is going to be short-lived, because then you're going to have competition enter the market with identical or even better products than yours, that you're going to have to immediately share the market with, and therefore your success is going to be less. So if you can protect your idea, protect your work, protect your innovation, then you will add to the success of your startup. So intellectual property is essentially then the lifeblood of the medical science startups. By protecting your inventions and your innovations from being copied and misused, you are basically safeguarding or securing your future in the market. Now, understanding the different types of intellectual property is important. There are patents, which most people have heard of for sure. Trade secrets, a little less common. Copyrights, everyone's heard of that for text. And trademarks is another one, for your branding, for your your name and that's and such. And all of them are crucial. Now, for pharmaceutical drugs, for instance, patents are especially vital, as they provide a limited time, because patents only protect you for so much time. But they provide you with this limited time monopoly of the market. So if it's a really exciting drug that really works well, then for that period of time you're going to be king of that market, and you're going to make back the money that you invested in the production of that drug. In the medical science, basically in the medical sciences sector, effective IP management is not only about just about protection, but it's also about the strategic positioning of the product in the market. So you need to understand the competitive landscape, identify potential collaborators or licensing opportunities, because that's where you're going to make your money, and navigate the complex web of global IP regulations. So there's a fun one there, is when you have a patent, its patent is for a specific jurisdiction. Very commonly, it will be like the Americas, Europe, Asia. So you can have these big chunks where you can have your patent, but you have to be careful that if you are going to go global, if you want to sell globally and you care for that, then you're going to have to apply for a patent around all the different jurisdictions. Now, for example, Amgen, a biotech company, I'm sure you've heard of, they strategically managed their IP portfolio to protect all of its biologic drugs, right? For instance, erythropoietin, they're well known for that, and they had to protect it from competition, and they did so through a combination of patents and legal strategies. And then they maintained the market exclusivity that way, ensuring success of its treatments, right? Of its innovative treatments. And there's a perfect example of a requirement that you're not done when you have your product, your drug, and you think that's it, amazing. To be successful as a startup, you have to remember it's not just having the perfect product. You then need to market it. You need to sell it. You need to, you know, actually get it out into the marketplace. You have to get the users to purchase it, right? And that's an important, part of running a business. And so if you're the mad scientist, so to speak, and you've thought of this and it's wonderful and it was part of your graduate work and you're so happy with it and you were actually able to protect it through IP, if the running of the business is not you, it's not your thing, right? Then you need to bring someone on board, to replace you for that role, right? To take that product and make it successful in the market, because there are many, many, many products that were just absolutely amazing products, fantastic. And then you have this terrible failure story where the company was not able to get it into market and sell it successfully for various reasons, but it was basically because they just didn't put the effort in and the work required in order to get it successful in a market. So what are some of the challenges with the medical sciences? So the medical science sector faces several challenges, including, navigating complex regulations. That's the big one, right? Securing funding, that's a problem for everyone. But then keeping pace with rapid technological advancements. Wow, it's just, how do you keep track, right? There's so many. You definitely need to do that in our field, because it's a very interesting field to be in, medical sciences, and therefore there are a lot of people that are looking to integrate technological advances. This, of course, leads to a very healthy and thriving, highly competitive landscape. That's tricky. Overcoming these challenges requires a blend of scientific expertise. Great, that's us. But then also business acumen and strategic thinking. That might not be us. That's where you really have to, look inwardly and say, is that me? Do I enjoy business? Is that something I want to do? What's this strategic thinking? What does that mean, right? So startups in this field, have to be adept at managing the regulatory hurdles, of course, which can vary significantly across, different jurisdictions, so countries and regions. They also need to be proactive in securing the funding that's needed to, get your product to market. And then you're thinking, well, I've got a friend that can give me some money, maybe even a venture capitalist or something like that. But the challenge is that in our world of medical science, the cost sometimes can be much, much greater because of the regulatory hurdles. All the clinical trials and the validation and all that fun stuff, and then the regulatory, submissions. And so you don't think of that when you get involved, and then you realize, oh my God, I'm just not going to have enough money. And so that's where it's tricky, right, in our world. And so you're going to want to look for a mix of venture capital, maybe angel capital, some grants, some strategic partnerships, right? Because staying ahead of the technological advances, is of course another key challenge. And as the medical science, area evolves rapidly with new discoveries and innovations all the time, this is going to be something you're going to have to stay on top of continually, right? Once again, here's an example: CRISPR, right? Which we mentioned earlier, they faced regulatory challenges, in developing its gene editing therapies. But they were successful in navigating this process and securing approval. Woohoo, pop the champagne. Once you get approval, fantastic, right? For the clinical trials, right? And here's this demonstrates the importance of understanding and addressing the regulatory hurdles in the medical sciences, because if you just get this fantastic discovery, oh my God, this is so cool, we can, this is gene editing, right? If you don't think of, how are we actually going to be able to use this, how are we going to actually be able to commercialize this, then it ends there and your startup is not successful. So if you're working in the medical sciences, where are you actually working? Well, about a third of us are working in hospitals or universities, and we're working on fundamental research. No surprise, it's a feeder for the rest of the industry, and it's so important. For instance, that's why you're here as a graduate student. After that, it's basically it goes by the industry. So pharmaceutical, of course, largest industry there. Drugs are still important for the delivery of medicine. Yes, we'd love it to be more preventive, but there's still that everybody wants to just take a pill and make themselves feel better, right? So that's not going away anytime soon. Now, of course, we're working on it, but it's going to take time. The rest of it is essentially what supports the delivery of healthcare. So, of course, diagnostic laboratories, medical equipment and supplies that come into this, and then medical instruments, right? That's what those are the industries where you're going to be working in medical science. Now, the other figure on this slide is not really fair, actually. These are the larger successful companies that are operating in Canada that are in our space. It's just to give you an idea of how big it can get. So Johnson and Johnson here, obviously one of the biggest, with $4 billion per year. Wow, revenue. But you still have all the known pharmaceutical companies. But this just gives you an idea of where the money's at. I'm not saying where you need to necessarily strive for, if you're a startup, but it just gives you an appreciation of the money that's available in the market for this kind of work. Now, of course, this is just an example of pharmaceutical. We could do the same thing for other types of medical science sectors. But this was just a way to kind of wow you in terms of the size and the vastness of these companies. So you are a founder of a new startup. Do you have anything in common with other founders from other startups? Well, I believe you do. Now here's 3 examples. I mean, not random, but I basically just picked, 3 founders that I thought of. So Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Sam Altman from OpenAI. But I could have added, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, Melinda Gates, actually, for what she has done alongside Bill Gates, Beyonce. I mean, just wow, what she's done with her career. Who else can we think of? Talk show host like Oprah Winfrey. Wow, right? So all these examples, do we share traits with these founders, other founders? I believe we do. So successful founders in medical sciences are no different, and they would share key traits such as vision, of course, very important. Innovation, of course, right? Willingness to take risks has to be there. Resilience to failure, you got to get back up and try it again. And importantly, which you'd think it's not, it doesn't seem obvious, but the ability to collaborate. I know a lot of the success stories of founders that you read about and you hear about, they all seem like lone wolves, that they did everything on their own, and they don't listen to anybody, and they don't partner with anybody. Well, not true at the beginning. I would say most founders are going to have to collaborate at the beginning in order to get things going. Now, in the end, once they're at the top and they're the boss, then maybe they give the impression that they haven't. But most people, most founders will need to collaborate at some point in the beginning to be successful. Now, these traits are essential in navigating the unique challenges of startups into the medical sciences. So, for instance, vision and innovation are crucial for identifying and pursuing the novel solutions that are, of interest for you in the market you're interested in. So, for instance, let's say gene editing or personalized medicine. Risk taking, on the other hand, is also inherent, is also needed due to the high uncertainty, right, and the long timelines that are associated with, for instance, drug development or clinical trials. Resilience and collaboration are vital for overcoming setbacks, and they're going to happen. And also for leveraging expertise from the various disciplines that are going to be involved in your startup. So to take us back to the example of CRISPR, the gene editing technology, Jennifer or Dr. Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, the founders of CRISPR, Cas9 gene editing technology, that's what they did. It was collaborative efforts for their innovative vision that led to this transformative impact that they've had on the field of genetic engineering. So there's a good example. So let's quickly sum up the founder's traits: vision and innovation, willingness to take risk, resilience to failure, and ability to collaborate. Those are the four that I think you should remember. Are there other traits? Yes, inevitably there are. And we'll talk about, we can discuss them, right? But those are the four that I would, take home, and say the ones that I you need to remember if you're going to be a founder. All four of them are important. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about adaptability and resilience using an example. So Anne Wojcicki, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her name, but I hope so, is the founder of 23andMe. And she had a very simple vision goal, and that was to give people direct access to their medical data, in this case, into their genetic data. So personal genomics is the space that she was in. She wanted to commercialize personal genomics. The challenge, of course, was the regulatory environment that exists in, for medical data. But the goal was to empower the patient, right? To give power to the patient. So 23andMe faced many hurdles, and the most important, of course, is that the FDA banned their product. Whoops! So that was a big problem for them, and essentially they had to take a time out. So they suspended their operations in 2013. They were founded in 2006. They were plugging away at it, and then they had to suspend operations because the FDA just banned their product. So why did they ban it? Because they just said scientifically it wasn't validated, so there was skepticism, and so they just said, no, I'm sorry, you can't continue. So what did they have to do? Well, they took a time out, and then they've tried to figure out, well, how do we move forward from this, right? So the issue, of course, was consumer education and trust, right? So meaning that the FDA was saying, well, no, it's not a validated product. There's skepticism. It's, you need to, provide something that's been validated to your consumer. And so essentially, they needed to work on improving consumer education and trust. So 23andMe and Anna never gave up. And what they did is they refined their scientific validation process, alleviated the regulatory body's concerns by providing some validation, some better evidence that their product was accurate, if you wish, and believable. That, of course, helped with them removing the stigma surrounding the skepticism at the consumer level about genetic testing, which gained consumer confidence. And so then they were now in a position to put their product out into the market and successfully sell it. But the next step, of course, is you have to have a company that's solid, that's in a position to blast all this out there and do well. And so very often, if there's a lot of momentum and interest in your company, you do what's called an initial public offering, an IPO. But that's very risky because you can always do an IPO and then it flops, right? And you lose everything. And these days, in order to put yourself out into like something with a soft landing, you do what's called a merger with a SPAC, which is a special purpose acquisition company, which is basically a shell company that's already in the stock market. So it's already there. It's already gone through its IPO, and it exists there. And so then what you do is you merge with that company, and then by doing so, you automatically are in the stock exchange by merging with an existing company that's already there. So it's basically a somewhat like a safer way of easing in to the stock market than doing an IPO. Anyway, that's what they did, and they did this to increase the company's stability. And we'll talk about mergers and acquisitions later on in the course. But in doing so, in 2021, they became, a very successful company. And though that was, what I just explained was very complicated, it's just to show you that, the idea can be very simple, which is what they had. They had a very simple, need to share or to have people, be empowered, by having access to their genetic data. And so the idea of it is very simple, but to get there was extremely challenging and very long. And essentially they had to almost wait it out, for changes to occur in the perception and the regulatory landscape before they were able to be successful. And of course they are. Good for them. It's a success story. But just to show it can be a very long road to success. Okay, so how about this resilience? Having this resilience as a founder. So it's critical. It's a critical trait for founders in medical sciences, and it involves embracing change. Learning from failure always. Persisting through adversity, because there always will be, especially when you're in regulatory, in a regulated environment. Maintaining a flexible strategy. There has to be some give and take that's possible. And emotional intelligence is also key. It helps in managing the stresses and the uncertainties of the startup life. I mean, you're going to live this for years, right? And this resilience is particularly important in the medical sciences, where the path from concept to market is there's so many challenges. There are so many lengthy development cycles, of course, the regulatory hurdles, and sadly, very often the need for substantial funding so that you can keep going and going and going and going and going. So that's something to keep in mind as a founder, that you need that resilience. Congratulations, you made it through the first lecture. Woohoo! So next up, we're going to talk about the value proposition.